Now, the recent COVID-19 lockdown has heightened many companies' awareness that internet connectivity is an indispensable tool. But for most South African small and medium-sized enterprises, the high cost of data continues to be an issue. Despite intervention from the Competition Commission, the country still has some of the most expensive data rates on the continent, if not the most expensive, actually. For more on this, we're joined by James Hodge from the Competition Commission. James, what seems to be the resistance here?
Well, and also costs are higher because of things like a lack of spectrum. So whilst the data inquiry reached some agreement for an immediate drop in prices and zero rating, there was also a longer-term program in order to improve competition by regulating the industry at a wholesale level and releasing spectrum through ICASA. So one has to realize that that longer-term program is necessary to be put in place before we can see much lower data prices in the future.
What is it that other countries on the continent are doing right that we seem to not be doing?
Well, I think the one is that they have released spectrum to the mobile operators, so they've gone through a digital migration. We're yet to do that, and there is a promise of that in early 2021, but that does substantially bring down costs. We think that competition is also weaker in South Africa than in many of those markets, and that's something we have to fix as well. In those countries, there's less reticence to regulate the industry in order to bring down the prices, and we need to do the same. So although spectrum will help, unless there's competition, it won't be passed on to the consumers.
Competition is weaker in the country. When you look at other countries on the continent, for instance, major players here on the country are the ones servicing those countries in the rest of the continent in terms of provision of data. So that's kind of confusing.
Yeah, and we found in the inquiry that, in fact, Vodacom and MTN typically offered much lower rates in other countries than they did in South Africa. And that is a product of a lack of competition here, and that is something that needs to be fixed. So dropping prices to prevent immediate excessive pricing is one step, but it's the first of many steps that we need to go through. So the Competition Commission is currently working with ICASA around their own review of wholesale regulation. And we're also looking at changes to the Electronic Communications Act, which would make it easier to regulate these companies and bring down prices.
For the most quote-unquote thriving economy, or the most progressive economy on the continent, what does lagging behind on this particular issue mean for us, or what does it translate to on the ground? We mentioned in the introduction that small to medium-term businesses are the most impacted.
Well, I think COVID has provided many lessons, but one has been that it's moved the economy online fairly rapidly, and we expect that to stay. But as you rightly point out, if small businesses don't have affordable access to data, then they can't be part of that new economy, that so-called fourth industrial revolution. So this is particularly problematic, and that's why I think it's been given focus by ourselves, but it's also partly a focus in the Presidential Economic Recovery and Reconstruction Program to try and bring down these data costs, release spectrum, and ensure that businesses can participate. So there's a real risk to business, but also consumers. Most of our media is now consumed online, and to participate in a democracy, you need to be online. So it is essential that consumers have that access at affordable prices.
That it's taken so long means what? How much longer will it take?
Well, I think, we saw immediate release or relief at the beginning of this period through the consent agreements. And part of that is an enormous push for free data around educational and government services, which proved particularly useful during COVID when schools were shut and learners had to shift online. So that free data is not reflected in the price comparisons that you do see, but that is an enormous part of the effort to bring down data prices. So the next stage is really moving to a regulatory, which we would expect within the next 12 to 18 months to be put in place. Spectrum should be released within the next 6 months, and that should have a major effect as well. So hopefully there's some relief in the short-term horizon.
We live in hope. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon from the Competition Commission, and that was James Hodge.